Clara said she was working late. A conference call with the Singapore office. She'd explained, her fingers tapping out a brisk rhythm on her phone, her eyes already distant. Liam had nodded, accustomed to the cadence of their increasingly separate lives. He'd made himself a simple dinner, the silence of their spacious, minimalist apartment pressing in on him. It was an apartment her father, Marcus Thorne, had secured for them, a fact that was never forgotten and often mentioned. It felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage where he was a guest, not a resident. At 8:47 p.m., Liam's phone buzzed on the granite countertop. He saw the name David Henderson, and a flicker of confusion went through him. Henderson was Clara's boss, the senior vice president at Thorne Development's biggest competitor. Liam had met him once at a sterile corporate event. He answered, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Liam, sorry to bother you at home. Henderson's voice was crisp, professional. I was just wondering if Clara was feeling all right. She missed the 7 p.m. project review, and it's not like her. We were all waiting. The world tilted on its axis. The quiet hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a roar. Liam stood perfectly still, the cold of the stone island seeping into his fingertips. A conference call with Singapore. The lie was so simple, so mundane. And yet, it was a fault line, a deep, structural crack that had just shuddered open, revealing a hollow space where the foundation of their marriage was supposed to be. He thought of the intricate architectural plans he spent his days perfecting, where every line had a purpose, every joint was designed for integrity. A single miscalculation could bring the whole thing down. In that moment, he understood his marriage was a structure built on a lie, and the collapse was inevitable. The only question was how much damage it would do on the way down. Within seconds, a 7-year partnership felt like a blueprint for a ruin. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? That moment when you realize the story you've been living is fiction. Have you ever had a moment like that? A single sentence that changes everything you thought you knew? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be fascinated to hear your stories. And if you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more content just like this. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the beginning of the end. To understand the weight of that phone call, you have to understand the quiet humiliations that preceded it. Liam wasn't just a husband. In the eyes of the Thorne family, he was a project, a fixer-upper, a man with a respectable but, in their view, pedestrian profession, an architect who designed modest home extensions and boutique office renovations. He was a stark contrast to the world of cutthroat, high-stakes commercial real estate that Marcus Thorne dominated with an iron will and a silver tongue. Just 2 weeks prior, they had been seated around the polished mahogany table in the Thorne family mansion. Sunday dinner was a command performance, a weekly ritual where Marcus held court, dispensing judgments and business advice with equal, unassailable confidence. The air was thick with the scent of roasted rosemary and condescension. So, Liam, Marcus began, swirling a blood-red vintage in his glass. He had a way of saying Liam's name that made it sound like an apology. Still tinkering with kitchens and attic conversions? Anything substantial on the horizon? The table fell silent. Clara's mother, Eleanor, offered a tight, sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Clara herself studied her plate, her fork tracing patterns in the sauce. She was the silent enabler, a spectator to her husband's slow, weekly dismantling. Her silence was a betrayal Liam felt more keenly than any of her father's barbs. Liam met his father-in-law's gaze. He was a man of quiet composure, a trait Marcus often mistook for weakness. I'm working on a few things, Marcus. They're coming along well. Coming along well, Marcus chuckled a low, dismissive rumble. He turned to the rest of the table, as if sharing a private joke. That's what you say about a slow racehorse. In my world, Liam, things don't just come along, they explode. They dominate. You have to be a shark. You're a very competent goldfish. The insult landed sharp and precise. Liam felt Clara flinch beside him, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But she said nothing. She didn't defend him. She never did. Her loyalty had been transferred, piece by piece, to the family that promised status and security, leaving him with an ever-growing deficit. Liam placed his hands on the table. His fingers were long and calloused, the hands of a man who still sketched with charcoal and built physical models, not just digital renderings. Beside his plate was his worn, brown leather portfolio. He carried it everywhere. To the Thorns, it was a symbol of his small-time status, a relic from a bygone era. They imagined it was filled with blueprints for suburban deck editions. They had no idea it contained the schematics for a project so audacious, so city-defining, that would make Marcus Thorne's entire empire look like a child's collection of building blocks. Inside that portfolio was the quiet truth. It was the foundation of his patience, the source of his calm. He let Marcus believe he was a goldfish because soon, very soon, the shark was going to discover he was swimming in Liam's ocean. He looked at his wife, who refused to meet his eyes, and he felt a profound sadness. He wasn't just hiding his success from her father. He was hiding it from her. He had wanted it to be a surprise, a triumph they could share, a way to finally prove to her and her family that he was worthy. But as he sat there, absorbing another casual degradation, he began to wonder if she had already made her choice. He wondered if she even wanted to be proven wrong. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was crumbling. Back in the apartment, the silence after Henderson's call was deafening. Liam ended the call with a polite, non-committal phrase, his mind a whirlwind of cold, clear thoughts. He was an architect. He understood structure. He knew that a building's integrity depended on the honesty of its materials. The material of his marriage had just been exposed as fraudulent. He didn't pace. He didn't rage. His response was methodical, precise. He walked into his home office, a room Clara called his hobby space, and sat at his drafting table. The portfolio lay beside him. He ran a hand over the worn leather, a familiar, comforting gesture. For years, this portfolio had been his silent companion, the keeper of his secret ambition. It held the plans for what the city was calling the Skyline Project, a breathtakingly elegant 70-story skyscraper that would redefine the city's silhouette. He wasn't just an architect on the project. He was the architect. He was the lead developer. He was the majority stakeholder in the private consortium Ethelred Development, a name he'd chosen for its old-world resonance, a deliberate shield of anonymity. Clara arrived home just after 11 p.m. She breezed in, dropping her keys into a ceramic bowl with a clatter that seemed overly loud in the tense silence. She exuded a forced, brittle energy. "God, what a night," she sighed, pulling off her heels. Singapore was just relentless. "I am exhausted." Liam turned from a window where he'd been watching the distant city lights. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the expensive cut of her suit, the carefully maintained facade of a successful executive. He saw the woman he had fallen in love with, the sharp, witty art history student who had once claimed to despise her father's world of corporate greed. And he saw the stranger she had become, a person who could lie to his face with such casual ease. "How is David Henderson?" he asked. His voice was quiet, devoid of accusation, which made it all the more potent. Clara froze, her hand halfway to unbuttoning her blazer. A flicker of panic crossed her face, quickly masked by indignation. "What are you talking about?" he called. At 8:47, Liam said, providing the detail with architectural precision. He was worried. Said you missed the 7 p.m. project review. He and the team were waiting for you. The air crackled. This was the moment. The moment for truth, for apology, for a desperate attempt to shore up the collapsing structure. Clara had a choice. She could confess, explain, and they could begin the painful work of assessment and repair. Or she could double down, protect the lie, and in doing so, sign the demolition order. She chose demolition. "He called you." Her voice rose, sharp with accusation. "Why on earth would he call you? That is completely unprofessional. I can't believe he would go behind my back like that." It was a masterful deflection, a textbook Thorn maneuver. When caught, attack the process. Discredit the accuser. Never, ever admit fault. Liam felt something in him go cold, a final, quiet click of a lock falling into place. "He called me," Clara, because he was concerned for your well-being, Liam said, his voice still unervingly calm. He thought something might have happened to you. It seems he has more genuine concern for you than you have respect for me. Oh, don't you dare, she shot back, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare take that sanctimonious tone with me, Liam. You have no idea the pressure I'm under, the deals I'm juggling. My father is counting on me to help land the construction bid for the new Skyline project. It's the biggest thing this city has ever seen. While you're in your hobby room, drawing up plans for someone's patio. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it was almost comical. She was using his own secret project as a weapon against him, brandishing it as proof of her superior importance, while belittling the very work that made it possible. She was so blinded by her father's narrative, so desperate to live up to the Thorn name, that she couldn't see the truth standing right in front of her. The Skyline Project, Liam repeated softly, the name of his creation feeling alien on her tongue. It sounds important. It is, she said, mistaking his quiet tone for capitulation. It's everything. It would secure our family's legacy for a generation. And I have to be at my best. Sometimes it means networking. It means having drinks with clients and contacts that you wouldn't understand. It's a world of sharks, Liam, not goldfish. There was again her father's insult, now coming from her lips. It was no longer a stray comment at a dinner table. It was her worldview. It was what she truly believed. Liam nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply absorbed the information. He was a planner, a strategist. He understood that before you can build, you must survey the land. He had just completed his survey of their marriage. The ground was unstable. The bedrock was gone. Any attempt to build further would be an act of profound foolishness. I see, he said, and he did. He saw everything with a painful, devastating clarity. He saw the lies, the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty born of ambition and insecurity. He saw that he was married to a woman who was ashamed of him, a woman who would lie about her whereabouts not for a sordid affair, but for something almost worse, networking. For the simple, sterile act of climbing a ladder he had already built. That night, Liam didn't sleep in their bed. He stayed in his office, the door closed. He didn't work on the plans for the tower. Instead, he pulled out a fresh sheet of vellum and a soft-leaded pencil. With the precise, steady hand of a master draftsman, he began to sketch out a new plan. It wasn't for a building. It was for his life. And the first step was demolition. The days that followed were a study in cold civility. Liam and Clara moved around each other like ghosts in their own home, the unspoken truth a palpable presence between them. Clara, for her part, acted as if their confrontation had never happened. She was bright, brittle, and constantly busy, her phone a permanent extension of her hand. She was consumed by the pursuit of the Skyline project, dropping names of city officials and rival bidders, completely oblivious to the fact that she was reporting the progress of a war to the man who commanded both armies. Liam listened patiently. He was gathering data, assessing weaknesses. He learned that Marcus Thorne was leveraging every political and financial connection he had to secure the primary construction contract for the tower. It was more than a job. It was a legacy project for him. Marcus had publicly declared that Thorne Construction was the only firm with the prestige and capability to handle such a monumental undertaking. His arrogance was his Achilles heel, and Liam watched as he exposed it time and again. One evening, Liam was working late in his real office, a discreet, high-tech studio in a converted warehouse downtown, the headquarters of Ethelred Development. His team of architects and engineers, the best in the business, were finalizing the tender documents for the construction phase. His second-in-command, a sharp and loyal woman named Sarah Jenkins, approached his desk. "The preliminary bids are in," she said, handing him a tablet. "Thorne Construction is on the list, as expected. Their proposal is aggressive, arrogant, even. It reads like they assume the contract is already theirs." Liam scrolled through the document. He saw Marcus's signature bravado in every line, the inflated budget projections, the demands for creative control that encroached on the architect's vision, the thinly veiled threats about leveraging their influence with the city's planning commission. He's tried to intimidate the developer, Liam murmured, a small, grim smile touching his lips. He has no idea who he's dealing with. Does Clara know? Sarah asked gently. She was one of the few people who knew the full story of Liam's double life. No, Liam said, his gaze distant. She thinks I'm designing a sunroom for a dentist in the suburbs. The lie had become a necessary shield. He had once dreamed of revealing his success to her in a moment of shared triumph. He'd imagined the look on her face, the shock, the pride, the realization that the quiet, steady man she'd married was a titan in his own right. Now, that dream was dead. The reveal, when it came, would not be a celebration. It would be a reckoning. The perfect stage for this reckoning was fast approaching, the annual Thorn Foundation Charity Gala. It was the pinnacle of the city's social calendar, an event where Marcus Thorn showcased his wealth and influence under the guise of philanthropy. This year, Marcus had announced he would be making a special presentation about the future of the city's skyline, a clear and public move to associate his name with Liam's tower. He was, in essence, hosting a party to announce his intention to conquer Liam's kingdom. Liam knew he had to be there. It was time to stop sketching and start building. His new life required a formal groundbreaking. A week before the gala, Clara approached him in the kitchen. She was holding 2 thick, cream-colored envelopes. The invitations for the gala came, she said, her tone casual, but her eyes watchful. I know these things aren't really your scene, but it's the most important night of the year for my family. My father is making a huge announcement. It would mean a lot to me if you came and made an effort. An effort? Liam asked, turning to face her. You know what I mean, she said, a defensive edge to her voice. Don't just stand in the corner with your portfolio looking miserable. Talk to people. Network. My father's associates will be there. Try to be impressive. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She wanted him to perform, to play the part of the supportive, slightly inadequate husband while her father laid claim to his life's work. She wasn't inviting her husband. She was summoning a prop. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Liam said, his voice a mask of calm. He took the invitation from her hand. His name was printed beneath hers in a smaller, less prominent font, Ms. Clara Thorne and Mr. Liam Cowan. Even on paper, he was an afterthought. Good, she said, relieved. Wear the blue suit. The one Dad said makes you look almost corporate. She turned and walked away, missing the look in his eyes. It was the look of an architect reviewing a condemned building one last time before the demolition crew arrives. He looked down at the invitation, a formal declaration of war disguised as a party request. He knew exactly what he would wear, but it wouldn't be the blue suit. And he would bring his portfolio, not as a prop, but as a weapon. The quiet goldfish was about to show the sharks what it meant to be the architect of the entire ocean. He was going to attend the party not as Ms. Clara Thorne's husband, but as the man who held the Thorne family's future in the palm of his hand. The night of the gala arrived on a wave of cool autumn air. The venue was a grand ballroom in a historic hotel, a place of soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and the hushed, expectant murmur of the city's elite. Liam stood for a moment outside the arched entrance, the weight of his leather portfolio a familiar comfort in his hand. He had arrived alone. He told Clara he would meet her there, a small act of separation that felt significant. He wore a custom-tailored suit of charcoal gray, a color that was understated yet authoritative. It was not the blue suit of a man trying to look almost corporate. It was the suit of a man who owned corporations. He stepped inside, and the warmth and noise of the party washed over him. He saw the Thorns across the room, a constellation of power and privilege. Marcus was holding court, his voice booming, his gestures expansive. Eleanor stood beside him, a portrait of regal elegance, while Clara, radiant in an emerald green gown, laughed at something one of her father's sycophantic partners said. She scanned the crowd, a brief flicker of annoyance crossing her face when she didn't see Liam. Liam didn't go to her. Instead, he moved along the periphery of the room, an observer, a strategist mapping the terrain before the engagement. He saw the mayor, the head of the city planning commission, influential bankers, and rival developers. They were all here, drawn by the gravity of Marcus Thorne's ambition. They were all pieces on chessboard, and Marcus believed he was the only one playing. He eventually found a quiet spot near the French doors that led to a terrace, overlooking the glittering city lights. He could just make out the dark patch of land by the river where the foundation of his tower would soon be laid. His tower. A bit overwhelming, isn't it? Liam turned. A distinguished man with silver hair and intelligent eyes stood beside him. He recognized him immediately. Arthur Vance, a legendary figure in the city's development community. Vance was old money, but he'd built his reputation on innovative design and unimpeachable integrity. He was one of the few people Marcus Thorne genuinely saw as a peer and whose respect he craved. "It can be," Liam said with a polite nod. "You're Liam Cowan, aren't you?" Vance said, extending a hand. "Clara, Thorne's husband." "I am," Liam replied, shaking his hand. "Marcus talks a big game," Vance said, his gaze sweeping the room. "Always has. But talk doesn't raise steel beams. I've been hearing whispers about this Skyline project. Everyone assumes it's a Thorne venture, but the real developer, this Ethelred firm, they're ghosts. Brilliant ghosts. They've managed the land acquisition and permitting with a finesse I haven't seen in 30 years. Whoever is behind it is either a genius or a madman." Liam allowed a small smile. "Perhaps a bit of both." Vance looked at him, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "You're an architect, I hear." "Yes. Anything substantial on the horizon?" Vance asked, unknowingly echoing his father-in-law's condescending question. But where Marcus's tone was laced with mockery, Vance's was one of genuine professional interest. Before Liam could answer, Clara appeared at his side. Her smile was bright and brittle. "Liam, there you are. I was looking for you. Mr. Vance, how wonderful to see you." "Clara," Vance greeted warmly. "I was just getting to know your husband." "Oh, Liam tend to find the quiet corners," she said, looping her arm through his. It was a gesture of possession, meant to pull him back into his designated role. "He's not much for all this," she squeezed his arm, a silent command. "Play along. Behave." On the contrary, Vance said, his perceptive gaze moving between them. "I get the feeling Mr. Cowan is exactly where he wants to be." Just then, the lights dimmed slightly and a hush fell over the crowd. Marcus Thorne was striding toward the stage, a microphone in his hand. It was time for his grand announcement. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus boomed, his voice filling the cavernous room. "Tonight, we are not just here to support a good cause. We are here to celebrate the future of our great city." He launched into a soaring speech about vision, legacy, and ambition. He spoke of a new landmark that would scrape the sky, a beacon of prosperity and power. He didn't mention the Skyline project by name, but the implication was clear. He was positioning himself as the patriarch of this new era. It takes a certain kind of strength, a certain boldness, to turn such a vision into reality, Marcus declared, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "It's a world for sharks, for titans. There is no room for small dreamers, for those who are content to tinker on the sidelines." Liam felt Claire's grip on his arm tighten. She was looking at her father with pure adoration. She believed every word. She saw him as a titan, and by extension, saw herself as the heir to that legacy. Liam, standing beside her, was just a footnote. As Marcus's speech reached its crescendo, Liam gently disengaged his arm from Clara's. He gave her a calm, unreadable look and began to move toward the stage. "Liam, what are you doing?" she hissed, a note of panic in her voice. "Don't make a scene. Dad is speaking." He didn't answer. He continued his steady, unhurried walk toward the stage, his leather portfolio held firmly in his hand. The crowd began to murmur, parting for him as he moved. He was a stone dropping into a perfectly still pond, the ripples of his movement spreading outwards. He reached the short set of stairs to the side of the stage, just as Marcus was delivering his final, triumphant line. "And Thorne Construction is ready to lead that charge." As applause filled the room, Liam stepped onto the stage. He walked directly toward his father-in-law, who had frozen, a look of stunned disbelief on his face. The applause faltered, dying out into a confused, expectant silence. Every eye in the room was on the two men. The quiet, underestimated son-in-law and the titan of industry, face to face in the spotlight. The quiet before the storm had ended. The wind was beginning to howl. Marcus Thorne stared at Liam, his face a mask of incandescent rage. The convivial host had vanished, replaced by the ruthless CEO whose boardroom had been breached. "Liam, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" he whispered, his voice a venomous hiss that didn't carry past the stage. "Get off my stage. Now." Liam didn't flinch. He looked out at the sea of faces, the powerful, the wealthy, the influential, and then his eyes found Clara's. He saw confusion warring with fear and a dawning horror on her face. He held her gaze for a moment before turning back to Marcus. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply spoke into the microphone Marcus was still clutching. "Good evening," Liam said, his voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the silent ballroom. "My name is Liam Cowan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Marcus Thorne's son-in-law." A nervous titter went through the crowd. Marcus's expression hardened. This was a public humiliation, and it was just beginning. "For the past 7 years," Liam continued, his tone measured and deliberate, "I have had the privilege of being part of the Thorne family. And in that time, I've learned a great deal. I've learned what this family values: status, appearance, and what they call strength. I've sat at countless dinners where I was reminded of my place. I was called a goldfish in a world of sharks. I was told my work, designing homes and spaces for people to live and work in, was mere tinkering. I was advised to look almost corporate so as not to embarrass anyone. Each word was a stone, carefully chosen and placed. It wasn't an angry tirade. It was a list of grievances delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon. The audience was captivated. This was better than charity speeches. This was drama, raw and real. Clara looked as though she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Eleanor, her mother, had a hand to her chest, her face pale. "My wife," Liam went on, his voice softening with a touch of genuine sadness, stood by and watched. "She is a brilliant woman, trapped between the man she married and the father she worships. She recently told me about the immense pressure she's under, working to help her father's company land the construction bid for the new Skyline project. She described it as a battle of titans, a world I couldn't possibly understand." He paused, letting the silence stretch. He then turned his full attention to Marcus. "Marcus, you just gave a magnificent speech about vision and legacy. You spoke of a skyscraper that will redefine our city. You positioned Thorne Construction as the only firm worthy of building it. There's just one problem with that." Liam placed his worn leather portfolio on the lectern. He unzipped it with a slow, deliberate motion. The sound was deafening in the silence. He didn't pull out plans for a patio. He pulled out a single, beautifully rendered architectural drawing. It was a stunning, detailed elevation of the Skyline Tower, elegant and bold. Below the drawing, in clean, block letters, were the words, "The Skyline Tower. Lead architect, Liam Cowan. Developer, Ethelred Development Group." He then pulled out a second document, a certificate of incorporation for Ethelred Development Group. He held it up for all to see. Listed as founder, CEO, and chairman of the board was a single name, Liam Cowan. The quiet bomb had detonated. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The murmuring exploded into a roar of shock and disbelief. Marcus Thorne looked at the documents, then at Liam, his face draining of all color. The arrogance, the confidence, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, stunned old man. He looked as if the very foundations of his world had turned to dust beneath his feet. "You have been trying to intimidate my company for months," Liam said, his voice cutting through the noise, directed solely at Marcus now. "You have been trying to leverage your political connections to influence a bidding process for a project that I own. You stood on this stage tonight and tried to claim my life's work as your own legacy." He turned to the audience again. "Marcus Thorne is right about one thing. It is a world of sharks. He just never realized he was circling my ship." As if on cue, a figure stepped out from the side of the room, and began walking toward the stage. It was Arthur Vance. He moved with an unhurried grace, his presence alone commanding silence. He reached the stage, took a spare microphone from the lectern, and stood beside Liam. For weeks, Vance said, his respected voice resonating with authority, our city's business community has been speculating about the mysterious and brilliant mind behind the Ethelred Group. I have had the distinct pleasure of meeting with their representatives, and I can say without hesitation that the vision and integrity behind the Skyline project are second to none. He placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to formally introduce you to that visionary. Liam Cowan is not just an architect. He's the driving force that will shape the future of this city. Marcus, he said, turning to the utterly broken man, you should be the proudest father-in-law in this room. Instead, you seem to be the most surprised. The finality of Vance's endorsement was absolute. It was a public coronation and a public execution, all in one. The chess match was over. Checkmate. Liam looked out at the crowd, his expression not of triumph, but of a deep, weary resolution. His gaze finally settled on Clara. Her face was a canvas of shock, shame, and a terrible, dawning understanding. The man she had dismissed, the man she had lied to, the man she was ashamed of, was the very titan her father had always pretended to be. And in her blindness, she had betrayed him completely. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic tableau of social implosion. As Liam and Arthur Vance stepped off the stage, they were engulfed by a throng of the city's most influential figures. Hands were shaken, backs were slapped, and business cards were pressed into Liam's palm. He was no longer Liam Cowan, the quiet architect. He was Mr. Cowan, the visionary, the man of the hour. Through the scrum, he could see the Thorne family nucleus collapsing in on itself. Marcus stood frozen on the stage for a long moment, a statue of public ruin. His associates, the ones who had been laughing at his jokes minutes earlier, now avoided his gaze, melting away into the crowd. Eleanor finally managed to lead him off the stage, his movements stiff and robotic. The titan had been felled, not by a rival shark, but by the goldfish he had kept in his own home. Clara pushed her way through the crowd, her eyes wild with a desperate, frantic energy. She finally reached Liam, grabbing his arm. The emerald of her dress seemed garish and wrong now, the color of envy and greed. Liam, she whispered, her voice cracking. Liam, you have to talk to me. I don't understand. Ethelred, the whole project, it's you. Liam looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. He felt a profound sense of distance, as if he were looking at her from across a vast canyon. The love he had felt was still there, but it was a ruin, a beautiful, sad memory of a structure that no longer stood. Yes, Clara, he said, his voice devoid of malice, filled only with a deep, unshakable sadness. It's me. It was always me. But why didn't you tell me? She pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. Why would you keep this from me? The question, so full of her own blindness, was the final confirmation. Even now, in the face of this overwhelming truth, her first instinct was to see herself as the victim. Tell you, he repeated softly. Tell you what exactly? That the man you were ashamed of, the man you allowed your father to ridicule every Sunday, the man you lied to about your late-night meetings so you could curry favor for a project you thought was beneath him, that this man was worthy of your respect all along? Clara, respect is something you should have given me freely. It's the foundation. You don't award it as a prize once you discover your husband is secretly wealthy and powerful. Her face crumbled. The truth of his words was irrefutable. She had failed the most fundamental test of a partner. She had offered conditional love, conditional respect, and the conditions had been set by her arrogant father. I love you, she stammered, the words sounding hollow and desperate. I know you believe that, Liam said gently, carefully removing her hand from his arm. But your actions told a different story. You chose them, Clara. Over and over, you chose their values, their approval, their narrative. You stood by in silence, and your silence was the loudest sound in the room. He looked past her, to where her parents were making a hasty, undignified exit through a side door, pursued by the whispers and stares of their former admirers. "I have to go," he said. "I have a lot of work to do. On my building. On my life." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the ballroom. She was a beautiful, tragic figure in her emerald gown, the queen of a fallen kingdom, surrounded by the wreckage of her own choices. Liam didn't look back. The demolition was complete. Now, the difficult work of clearing the site and designing a new future could begin. He walked out of the grand hotel and into the cool night air. The city lights spread before him like a promise. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe. The weeks that followed the gala were a slow, cascading series of consequences for the Thorne family. The story of Marcus's public humiliation became the stuff of legend in the city's business circles. It was a cautionary tale about arrogance and the danger of underestimating the quiet man in the room. Thorne Construction, as expected, was officially and very publicly rejected in the first round of bidding for the Skyline project. The reason cited was a fundamental misalignment of vision and values with the Ethelred Development Group. The corporate speak was a thin veil for the brutal truth. Liam had fired his father-in-law. The rejection sent shockwaves through the company. Key investors grew nervous, partners pulled out of other joint ventures, and the company's stock, once a pillar of stability, began a steady, inexorable decline. Marcus Thorne, the shark, was bleeding, and the other sharks in the water were beginning to circle. Clara left the apartment a few days after the gala. Liam came home to find her closet empty. A single key left on the granite countertop where his phone had buzzed with David Henderson's fateful call. There was no note. It was an act of surrender, a tacit admission that she had no right to the space any longer. The silence in the apartment was different now. It was no longer tense and oppressive. It was clean, empty, a blank page. Liam immersed himself in his work. He was in his element, leading his team, solving complex engineering problems, and navigating the intricate politics of a project of such magnitude. He was decisive, fair, and universally respected. His secret life was now his only life, and he wore it with a natural, unforced authority. He had never needed the validation of others, but now that he had it, he found it was a useful tool, nothing more. The real satisfaction came from the work itself, from seeing the lines on his drawings translate into plans for concrete and steel. About a month after the gala, he received a letter. It was handwritten on simple, plain stationery. The handwriting was Clara's. He opened it with a steady hand, unsure what to expect. Excuses, justifications, accusations. It was none of those things. It was just 2 short paragraphs. "Liam, I have spent every moment of the last month replaying our life together in my head. I've been looking for a moment where I can say, that's where I went wrong, but there wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. 1,000 moments where I chose silence over support, vanity over loyalty, and fear over love. The worst part is that I didn't even realize I was making a choice. There are no excuses for what I did, and I won't insult you by offering any. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you, for the disrespect I showed you, and for the blindness that made me unable to see the incredible man who was standing right in front of me. I betrayed you, and I will live with that for the rest of my life. Clara." Liam read the letter several times. It was the first honest communication she had given him in years. The absence of any request for forgiveness for a second chance was what made it powerful. It was a pure, unvarnished admission of fault. It was, he realized, the beginning of her own demolition process. She was finally taking a hard look at the faulty structure of her own character, a structure built for her by her father. A few days later, he received a call from an unknown number. He answered, and a hesitant voice said, "Mr. Cowan? It's Eleanor Thorne." Liam was surprised. He had always seen Eleanor as a passive figure, a beautiful accessory to her husband's ambition. "Liam," she said, her voice strained, "I am calling to. I need to apologize. I stood by my husband's side for 30 years, and I let his arrogance become the guiding principle of our family. I saw how he treated you. I saw the good, kind man you were, and I said nothing. I failed you as a mother-in-law, and I failed my own daughter by teaching her that a man's worth is measured by his net worth. What you did at that gala, it was devastating, and it was necessary. You held up a mirror to us, and the reflection was ugly. I don't know if our family can be rebuilt, but I wanted you to know that I see the truth now. Thank you." She hung up before he could respond. It was a stunning admission. The silent enabler had found her voice. The Thorne family, for so long a monolithic entity of arrogance, was fracturing, breaking apart into individuals who were being forced, for the first time, to think for themselves. The collapse was not just financial, it was moral. And from that collapse, there was perhaps a chance for something new to be built. But it was their project, not his. He had his own tower to worry about. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Skyline Tower was held on a bright, crisp morning 3 months after the gala. The site by the river was bustling with activity. A stage had been erected, and the audience was a collection of the city's most important people. The mayor, city council members, investors, and Arthur Vance, who was beaming like a proud father. Liam stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. He wore a simple, well-fitting suit and an expression of quiet confidence. He spoke not of wealth or power, but of community, of design, of creating a space that would serve the city for generations to come. He spoke with the passion of a true creator, not the bluster of a corporate raider. As he finished his speech and the applause began, he saw a figure standing at the back of the crowd, partially obscured by a large oak tree. It was Clara. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a plain coat. She looked thinner, and there were tired lines around her eyes, but she also looked clearer. The brittle, high-strung energy was gone, replaced by a quiet sobriety. She wasn't there to make a scene or to plead her case. She was just there to watch, to bear witness to the future she had almost been a part of. Their eyes met across the distance. She gave him a small, sad smile and a single, brief nod. It was a nod of acknowledgement, of respect. It was the nod she should have given him 1,000 times over 1,000 Sunday dinners. Then, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the city. Liam watched her go. The anger was gone, replaced by a sense of melancholic peace. The story of their marriage was over. It was a tragedy of misaligned values and broken trust. But a new story, his story, was just beginning. The first steel beam of his tower was being hoisted into the sky, a dark line against the bright blue. The first sentence of a new chapter written in steel and glass. He knew Clara had a long journey ahead of her. She had to untangle her identity from her family's toxic legacy. She had to learn to value integrity over image, character over currency. Whether she would succeed, he didn't know. Whether their paths would ever truly cross again was a question for a distant future, a future that no blueprint could predict. For now, he had his work. He had his integrity. He had reclaimed his name and his worth. He looked up at the sky, at the place where his vision would soon stand, and he felt a sense of profound, quiet vindication. True strength wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about having the vision to design the room itself, the patience to build it, and the integrity to stand by your work, even when no one else can see the blueprint. What do you think is the most important quality in a partner? Is it loyalty, respect, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I truly believe that stories like these are a way for us to understand our own lives better. If you found value in Liam's journey, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories about justice, integrity, and the quiet power of the underestimated. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, remember that the strongest foundations are the ones built on truth.